Dzień dobry, Szanowni Państwo.
Welcome. January the 1st, 2025. This is when Poland will take presidency in the European Council. When it comes to the practical aspect of digitization, it means that Poland will preside. And we are talking about telecommunication there. Key decisions are taken in digitalization, including cybersecurity. Poland and the Ministry of Digital Affairs will be responsible for organizing and running the work of 3 working groups. 1 for information society and telecommunication, the horizontal group for cybersecurity, and 3 a working group for the personal information protection. Thirdly, when it comes to cybersecurity, the representatives of the Ministry of Digitalization will preside over another group, the NIS Directive Cooperation and the Cyclone Network Cooperation. We'll also be actively involved in the work of the CSIRT network work. So we are working actively. So basically at this point I will host this debate. We will talk about our cooperation for the presidency. Now, Christiane will be the first one to take the floor. Christiane, please be so kind as to present what the European Commission has been doing in recent years. I'm talking about this mandate. Christiane, there's a lot to be discussed. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And before I get started, I also actually want to take the opportunity to congratulate the Deputy Prime Minister on such an ambitious agenda that you just outlined. It was music to our ears, as one would say. If I'm to talk a bit about what we've been up to the last 5 years, I think I could speak the whole day because we've been extremely busy. We started out with a strategy for cybersecurity with 26 actions outlined. We checked it a couple of months ago and we've actually ticked every single box. We've had legislative action in the field of critical infrastructure with the NIS2 directive, where we really increased not only the amount of sectors covered but also the amount of requirements. We've been addressing supply chain security with the Cyber Resilience Act. We had the Cyber Solidarity Act that set up cyber hubs and launched also the concept of a cyber reserve to support in case of large incidents. We come out with our first certification scheme. We've got digital identity in place, which is also a key element in trust in cyberspace. We set up the competence center, something that I think we don't talk enough about when we talk about legislative action. And we came out with a cyber defense policy, which actually also links very well to what the Deputy Prime Minister was speaking about before, about making the connections more between civil and military, and also leveraging much more all this activity that we've seen in the civilian space. We've been working hard on crisis management. There is more to come. We've been doing risk assessments, 5G toolbox. We've been trying to address the skills gap. We're not quite there yet. And then, of course, we ramped up international cooperation with our key partners. We have very strong cooperation going on with US. We're also building much more our cooperation with NATO. So just to say that a lot has gone on. We work very closely with our member states, of course, in this, as you will also know. But I think we could also say that it has to a certain extent also been playing catch up, because if we're looking at how fast our adversaries are moving, it was also clear that there was simply a lot to do. So we're actually proud that we got this done in the last 5 years.
Over the recent years, the entire cybersecurity community has been particularly busy getting all the legislation in the pipeline, and Poland has taken active part in shaping this legislation while supporting the European Commission in getting it through and in making these projects see light. And we certainly hope that this good cooperation will continue during the Polish presidency. And so I would like to hand over to Mr. Gawkowski, the Polish Prime Minister, to walk us through the major projects that Poland has come with. Well, first of all, this is a huge challenge for Poland, for digital transformation so that Poland can set the pace for the EU debate. We want to use the first 6 months of 2025 wisely, and we want to make sure that we work on the number of areas that relate to cyber reality that we live in. And there's a number of important areas. First of all, the element that needs to be combining all the other things there is cybersecurity, responsibility for funding cybersecurity, doing away with silos-related schemes, improved integration of cybersecurity and the role of MISA in the European cybersecurity, and making Poland a true coordination agent between the military and the civilian platform to make sure that the European Union is ready for that. And this is one of the most important priority areas that we want to focus on. Number two, security of supply chains. That is especially important for Poland because Poland is a hub for security of Ukraine. If you look at all transportation of military devices, transportation of heavy machinery, and various other types of supplies, so creation of cybersecurity needs to happen here. Poland sees the need of a broad discussion about the way we will use quantum computers, quantum cryptography. We want to talk about open source security, and we will do our utmost to work on crisis management at the higher level. So we want to consolidate that. One of the key priorities there would be for us to take up the projects that are already pending, but to make sure that we concluded with the adoption of the blueprint, because responsibility for large-scale incidents is something we simply have to account for. And over the last few months, we've been suffering from those large incidents. I'm talking about everybody within the EU. And I think we also need to have a broader perspective about 2025 type of digital diplomacy. Here we are, understanding how important it is to shape the appropriate responsibility of our member states for shaping cyber diplomacy. We have already spoken to our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Sikorski, and he's very much aware of our plans there. We simply want to set a new pace, a new dynamics into our work within the Polish presidency on the area of this security and digital diplomacy. May I kindly turn to Miguel right now? Quite recently, Spain, which was driving the EU Council, European Council as the presidency, and it did so with a great success. You have concluded a number of very important acts of legislation, which was no plain sailing to start with, which was not easy, but you were able to get it to the successful end. So in the light of the forthcoming Polish presidency, can you share some experience? Can you give us some good advice? Can you share your good practice that Poland may want to follow in your steps from the Spanish presidency?
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a pleasure for INCIBE to be here. And as you mentioned, I think it was a very interesting presidency. During our presidency, more than 75 dossiers was closed. This is a very important number. But first of all, I can share different views, but the first thing I have to share is good luck with the presidency. It's not really easy to push during less than 6 months that effectively are all the matters that we have. In our point of view, there are some goals, general goals. I would like to talk specifically about cybersecurity. But one of them was this global goal that we have during our presidency was the reindustrialization of Europe and the autonomy in terms of industrial sovereignty. And something that we are discussing a lot, not at this moment only, but now it's still on part of the conversation, is about the cyber policy, the cyber industrial policy of Europe. We have a clear idea, and my colleagues mentioned before, that we have to work in order to build these capabilities, in order to have this digital sovereign, in order to make sure our citizens, our companies, our government have the capacity to face the challenges of cybersecurity. And this is something that definitely should be in the is in the conversation, but this is something that we suggest that should be one of the priorities on the coming months and during the Polish presidency. As I mentioned before, we closed more than 75 dossiers. We have very important milestone, I guess. Definitely one of them on the digital arena was this first legislation on artificial intelligence. That I think it's important because not only because we as European, we were the first one doing that, but also because I think it's a change in the mindset of how can we legislate, how can we regulate all these matters. Because the artificial intelligence is addressing something that is very important. We cannot handle a technology that we don't know how it's going to be developing, but it's important to to focus on the risk management and the ethics. And this is something that in all the new legislation that is coming should be in the middle of the discussion. We cannot try to make sure that we cover all the bases. I think it's much important to make sure that we cover all the future scenarios. So this is something that probably with all the legislation that is coming should be on the table. It was mentioned the extent number of directives and regulations that are coming. Definitely should be something, the implementation of the NIS2 directive is going to be something very, very important during Polish presidency. We know that this October we have to have made the transposition, the directive in all the member states, but the implementation part is going to be the huge point over here. The Deputy Minister mentioned something that is very important: defense and civil spheres. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we were discussing about the barriers among the digital and physical world. Obviously, that's disappeared a long time ago. Now we are seeing that the civil and military sphere on cybersecurity is also disappearing. We are very, very interested on that. We start to work on that during our presidency. Actually, INCIBE has been appointed as accelerator of the Diana NATO project. We are taking part very seriously on all these matters, and this is also something that we are gonna be seeing. But regarding our presidency, we basically work over 2 points. First one was the legislative provision. We mapped the possible legislation that we should be addressing or moving forward during our presidency. This is something that all the member states during the rotatory presidency has on their mind. It's quite important, but the problem is the timing. So the timing is not always that it was planned. We had in our agenda some initiative that we will try to push, and we are going to try to close. And at the end, it depends a lot on what you receive when you start the presidency. So our recommendation, and I know that you are more than aware of that, is to start to work 1 year ago. In your case, now we are talking 6 months ago. I know that you've been working in Poland for a long time over this, but it's quite important to help to support the previous presidency to move forward the dossier that are coming to your table at the end of the day. And the second part, it was the priorities in the politics and policy priorities. In our case, we were working in 3 axes. First one is, and it's again, it was raised during this conversation, reinforce the capabilities. We have to work a lot on that. We have a lot of legislation coming to make sure that this happens, but definitely this should be probably an ongoing priority for all the member state presidencies. The second one, we wanted to be to put European Union as a key player in the cyber cooperation, not only cyber diplomacy, but also at the technical operational level. We try to move forward the bilateral cooperation among the European Union and the Latin American and Caribbean region, which is obviously, this is part of our key elements as Spaniards. So we try to do that, and maybe we have to still reinforce our security perimeter with the rest of the region. Definitely the current situation, the destabilization processes very close to here and also in Middle East are putting in our scope the needs to reinforce the cooperation with another region, with another main actors abroad the European Union. The last one, it was something that probably it's not probably is in the agenda of every member state. We have to increase the public-private cooperation. We try to make this a key element of our activities on cybersecurity. All the cyber shields, all the capabilities that we are going to be creating needs a strong industry on cybersecurity in Europe, and we have different elements to make sure that this is happening. So definitely during the presidency, the Poland presidency in next year, we will have a very important role to play with the European Cybersecurity Competence Center. This facility, this center of the European Commission, is for us a key driver of the industrialization on cybersecurity in Europe, of the funding, which is one of their mission, of the cybersecurity ecosystem, and we have to make sure that we push all the research, all the innovation to the commercial, to the industrial part. We cannot move forward with our industry. We cannot achieve the goals that we have in terms of cybersecurity without our industry. So we need to make sure that we have a more strong and more international industry, and we can compete. When during the Presidency Summit of Tallinn in 2017, one of the goals that the head of state appointed that was that Europe should be one of actually no one, should be the main cybersecurity region in the world next year, 2025. I think probably we are not going to be able to do that next year, but definitely we need to still working on that, because it's essential that we create all these capabilities, that we develop all the industry, and that we have the research and the innovation within the European Union to make sure that we can face all the challenges.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Thank you for your kind words on all your wishes. We will certainly do with all the good wishes. But I'm so glad that we can also use the support of your fantastic experts. We've always enjoyed great cooperation between Poland and Spain within the European Council. Mind you, we have already commenced getting ready for the presidency more than a year ago. Looked at the mapping of all the legislative acts. Well, the previous presidencies were so efficient that in the area of digitization and cybersecurity, so many things have been brought to successful end. Basically, all the projects have been concluded, so well done. But I'm very glad, Miguel, that you did mention the European Centre for Competence, and so did Christiane in the area of cybersecurity, because I don't think we speak enough about this structure. We will only see the full potential of it also during the Polish presidency, and we do have some plans about this competence center. So I'm very glad that we're there together and that we can push it forward on this agenda. And dwelling on what you've just said about the implementation and cyber resilience as well as future-proof legislation, I would like to give the floor to Axel, and I would like to hear your views on the position of the industry at large. So what is the position of you as stakeholders about the future mandate of the European Commission and the European Parliament? What is that you expect them to do?
Thank you. first of all, for having me here. Really great pleasure. Small spoiler at the beginning, there is a booth from ECSO and the European Competence Center over there, so please visit there. Second recommendation, please join us as well. So the more Polish companies will be at ECSO, the better representative you have also as a country, as an industry. I think Poland still can catch up there on representing your industry also in Brussels. Just to add what has been said from Miguel and also Christine, I think a lot of things have been done also from DG Connect. So we are there. Unfortunately not. So there's still maybe not a lot of things to be done, but from the industry point of view, a few things. Maybe we should focus also recommendation for the Polish presidency. First of all, always the same issue, but on a global level, we need more investment, continuous investment into cyber. Again, I think it's not only because of the technical importance we see on the geopolitical side, the risk, also what was mentioned, dual use both for civil and military purposes. We need continuous investment from European stakeholders, from funds, but also from the government side. I think it's a key importance we have, and otherwise we will not reach the target, what Miguel said, that will be a leading region in 2030 on cybersecurity. At the end of the day, also it comes down on funding. And that's, I think, an important topic. And within the funding, I think it's also, we're coming to that later on, public-private partnership. We need funding into the industry and not into the government. I think we need a really strong industry, that it's not fragmented, but also on a pan-European level, and that's what's missing so far. We are still too fragmented, and overall we cannot scale up on the industry level. I think that's probably the biggest challenge of Europe, of the European market. We have good know-how. I think that's not the problem. We have a good competence within all countries, but we're missing to scale up the industry on a level we, I think, need in the future on IT security. It will go more and more to platform economy on the digitalization as well, and there you need bigger players to catch up with that platforms we are running our infrastructure. And I think that's one of the key topics. And apart from the investment, we need, of course, a good cybersecurity policy that was mentioned before. We have regulation. Yeah, we need more regulation. At the end, regulation will not cover all the issues. One example, I think, that strikes to industry, also when it comes to dual use, the process for getting European-wide approvals for certification for products is far too long, and the process itself is not coordinated. That would be one specific example. We still need to catch up, and that would be one recommendation also for Poland presidency. If the approval takes 1 year or 1.5 years in the IT industry, that's not competitive. And we need that approval also to be able to sell products on the European side and also share the competencies of industry have, definitely also on the European side. We need, sorry to say, also buy European to a certain extent. We see that in other countries as well. We are still lacking on some priorities on buying European products. And those European products are not always ready to buy, so we need a more strategic view on what are the further needs for the next 3 to 5 years, and then strategically develop companies to the needs we have on the European Union side. As an example, the US is doing that. They did that with strategic investments from the government side to build up companies to fulfill their needs in cybersecurity space. And that takes long. That's not a 2 years process, that's a 5 to 10 years process where you strategically invest into companies that are then also competitive on the security side. It's not only about the pure money, it's also to having the right strategy from the European Union side, and then create companies later on that also can fulfill the requirements. We see that a lot of startups are here, also in Poland, in France, Germany, Spain especially, and the issue is also, of course, very good startups being bought by US companies at the end of the day. So we have to support them and make it attractive also for the European market side, that they want to get a European shareholder basis, not the US or whatever shareholder basis. That's what lacking. We invest in startups, which is great, and I hear in Brussels always we need startups. At the end of the day, if the startups are in 5 years down the road not European anymore, the investment was not, I think, on a strategic side. I think that's another recommendation we would have. We are working with the European Investment Fund, and they are supporting us on various aspects. We have, I think, in ECSO a very good community of private venture funds and investors. So I think there's money here available. Again, can be more, but I think we did a good job also at ECSO the last couple of years to have this community of funds over a couple of countries where we know each other and we exchange ideas and also provide, I think, a good basis for startups, hopefully also to stay in Europe and address the market. But one specific challenge, and that could be also partly supported by the government, the time for projects to be implemented in Europe versus US is by far too slow, which means the US market is much more receptive for startups. They care a little bit less on approvals, I would say, and that makes it more difficult even for startups to grow in the European market. First of all, it's fragmented, and secondly, our industrial base of the customer side is not acting as fast enough as the US. And on top, of course, US companies are spending more money, at least in cybersecurity than European companies. And that's something we have to overcome. We have to raise awareness also of our customer base on the industrial side that they have to spend more on cybersecurity investments than they did before. That's a big challenge. And maybe another idea on the harmonization of requirements, which is still also too fragmented. So we did a lot of regulation, but still the requirement part also within the industry is too fragmented. That cannot be solved only by regulation, but still we need a more standardized regulation part. We still have too fragmented, we have some sort of fragmented industry for fragmented customer base. And that's something we have to overcome. We have country-specific solutions we cannot scale, and that's not only because of the offering, that's also because of the demand, and we have to harmonize the demand later on. Actually, we have. Otherwise, we will fail with the regulation. And I think that's a very important point we still have to change. And maybe my last comment on technology trends, coming back to platforms. I think we have, also from the ECSO side, we contribute to regulations, but especially when it comes to cloud infrastructure, to AI technology, there are some sort of platform technologies, not necessarily dedicated only for cyber. But we have to make sure that we keep our sovereignty in those two important areas in the future to keep our sovereignty on the digitalization part in Europe. And I think that's very key. That's not necessarily a pure cyber issue, but we have to make sure that we have a clear cybersecurity strategy within those platform technologies we'll see in the next couple of years, because they will define our digital infrastructure for the next decade, I would say. And I think that's very important to keep that in mind.
Thank you very much for your valuable contribution. I think that after the first round of questions, the Minister would like to follow up on what Miguel has just said. So you mentioned cooperation between administration and business. And I do agree wholeheartedly that we need to find answers to how the administration must fulfill its tasks by supporting business rather than by creating barriers. And I can see that during our presidency we will need to discuss together the number of acts in the digital market. The European Parliament and the European Commission have adopted plenty of different legislative acts and documents over the recent months and years that address the changing digital reality. The NIS2 directive, the Digital Services Act, the AI Act, the Cyber Resilience Act. So these are all legislative documents that have been adopted, and they affect the way our reality is. But when I look and when I talk to Polish and European businesses, and we recently met in Brussels, and I can see that other ministers from other EU member states have a similar viewpoint. So we have plenty of legislations and legislative acts that address specific areas. However, small and medium-sized companies do not really understand how all of these documents and changes will affect them. So we need to create legislative acts in a way that helps businesses rather than hampers businesses and their development. It's a challenge for all member states. It's a very important challenge for our presidency as well. We need to try to reduce the administrative burden that we impose on entities that are subject to digital legislation. This should be an overarching goal for all of us. Miguel, I can see you would like to say something.
I think I cannot be more agree on that. You're absolutely right. That's why I mentioned before that we need to change the mindset about regulation. Because we have to try to understand that we are in some kind of business that it's very innovative, or at least should be very innovative. So we need to start to think that we have to go more to the risk management part than to try cover all the bases, because we probably are not be able to do that. Even if we develop all this legislation, that is probably necessary, but in a more comprehensive way, in a more clarified way, probably. We need to make sure that we can implement all of this legislation. We have received a lot of requests from private sector association asking us what is that of the Cyber Resilience Act. Are these going to be impacting me? So we are in this moment. So the knowledge, the communication about these things, the awareness about these things is something that we have to do, but also we have to make sure that they can fulfill the requirements. So definitely, and I think it's something that is part of your scope that you mentioned now, and again, I totally agree. We have also to support all this industry to make sure that they can fulfill the requirements. And Katarzyna also mentioned the potential of this European Cybersecurity Competence Center. We have now this tool of the European Commission to support the SMEs in order to make sure that they have all this legislation incorporated. We need to use all this European Cybersecurity Center and the national network, the network of the national competence centers to make that a reality. So that's why we are pushing, Katarzyna knows a lot about this, we are trying to push that all this legislation should be supported by the funding of the ECCC. And also we have to explore and to increase the use of the financial support to three-party mechanisms that allow the member state, allow the countries to customize the response for a common challenges. So if we have a common challenge, and in Poland, in France, and in Spain, in Italy, in every single country, have a different, because not all the member states are at the same level, all the different things. If we have a common challenge, if we have budget, and we can allocate individually through this mechanism in the different member states, we're going to make sure that we are going to raise. Because sometimes the same problems should be addressed in different way in the different member states. Sometimes not. It's not necessary to do that. But definitely this mechanism can support us to make sure that all these SMEs that we know in our member state better than in the whole European Union can be faced these challenges. So totally agree, and also we have to work in this clarification of the legislation in order to make sure that the SMEs and the rest of the industry understand all of this. But also in the current situation, we need to use the funding of the European Cybersecurity Center, is one example, this mechanism of the financial support to three parties to allocate the budget in order to make sure that they can fulfill the requirements. So definitely something important. And Axel mentioned in his intervention something that is a reality, but at the same time, we need to understand, our approach is quite is with the same goal is quite different. So he told about the importance not to invest in the government but invest in the industry. We understand that, we support that, but our view here is that this is not, you don't need to choose that. This is not an election. You have to invest in the public-private partnership in order to make sure that the industry is working to reinforce the capabilities of the government. Because at the end of the day, the capabilities are on the industry. We can reinforce our structure, we can have, but the industry should be supported. So this is something that we have to start to work in that idea, that we are not working for the public sector or we are not working for the private sector, we are working for the community, and we need to make sure to integrate the relations between the private and the public sector. And one last thing, and allow me to make this joke. I used to say that when we go, when we talk about United States, they are the champions on innovation, on technology frontiers. In Asia, China, you have the champions on manufacturing. We decide, I don't know why, that in Europe we want to be the champions on regulation. And this is a reality. So as champions on regulation, we have to make sure that we cover the bases, but we have to make simple and easy for our citizens and our industry. So totally agree about that you mentioned before.
Dziękuję bardzo, Miguel. Ja tylko ze swojej
Thank you very much, Miguel. Let me only add that the Excellence Center is an excellent platform that will enable us to facilitate cooperation between member states. It's the only hub within the European Union that brings together all representatives of the member states, representatives of the industry, and on top of that, representatives of the academic community, which has not been mentioned, but I think that it's very important to ensure proper cooperation between these three groups of partners if we want to be successful. So it has to be a closed circle, and I think this is the real power of the European Center of Excellence, which we need to use. I would now like to hand over to Christiane. Miguel said that we are the champions of regulations, and somebody has to lay down the regulations. So Christiane, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to do that, of course. I think it's absolutely true that we've come out, of course, with directives, regulations, etc. But I also like to remind people that when we look inside the NIS2 directive, for instance, and we look at the requirements that we're putting on these companies, it's probably not something that they shouldn't be doing anyways, considering our threat landscape. So, of course, the key question we have to ask ourselves as policy makers, as regulators, it is, does my job stop when the law is adopted? And here the answer is, of course, no, it does not. Because words on a piece of paper does not make cybersecurity better in Europe. We need to implement it, we need to invest, and we need to help our companies make sense of it. Now, I happen to be very lucky to be married to a guy who is often met by EU regulation, not in cybersecurity, but in the finance sector, where we have even more regulation. I don't think he has ever opened an EU law. What he looks at is industry standards. He looks at what is he required to do through standards. And I think I cannot stress enough the importance for us to look across all the legislation we have, and I say us as in all of us, to look across all the legislation we have in place, to find out what are the relevant standards, to translate this into something that you can literally hang on the wall next to your computer when you're doing your products that you're selling as part of the CRA. What are the requirements? All of these things are the key things that we have to focus on next. Another thing that I hear a lot is on reporting. I don't think that I've ever met a company yet that hasn't told me, oh my God, we have to report here, there needs to, DORA, GDPR, etc. And again here, it's also our responsibility, and I'm looking at the member states in particular, to make sure that this is easy for our companies. There's absolutely no need for them to report to 5 different platforms for one single incident. There are countries that have already set up a single reporting platform where you report only once, and then there's actually a computer that takes care of making sure that the entities get the information. So also just to say that we should actually, if we do our job well, none of our SMEs, none of our entities ever have to open the EU laws to find out what they have to do. We need to be able to guide them through it, and I think that's going to be our big task as we turn all of the words in the laws into better cybersecurity in Europe.
Christiane, nie mogłam się zgodzić z Tobą bardziej.
I couldn't agree more with you. It is clear that from the perspective of cybersecurity regulation, we cannot do away with notification requirements, but we can make it easier. And single entry point for incident notification is a concept that could address the needs of the industry in this respect. We have made it our priority to promote this institution, and Denmark has shown us that it's possible, that we can do it. So I think that we need to continue in that vein and scale it up. Another important legislative document is the European Digital Identity Portfolio, and I think that in Poland we were the first country to have this digital wallet. And we are doing our best to use the modern tools to make businesses' lives easier. Axel, would you like to comment, or can we move on to the next round of questions?
To move to the next round, maybe just one final remark. Regulation, we are great, but regulation will not pay our lunch, because that's not a business. That's something we have to keep in mind. And still my experience with our customer base on NIS2, especially the large companies, don't have an issue. They have enough IT expertise, they can handle that. But in the industry where we have like small, medium-sized companies, 10 to 100 people, whatever, no own IT, sometimes they are really struggling, to implement NIS2 regulation. It's nicely done, and they should do it, no worries, but they're not able to do it. And not because they don't want to do it, because they just don't know what to do. And that's maybe one final remark or request to Polish presidency. If you do something, try to keep it simple and a way that companies can implement it. Because if we do regulation which is there and the companies are there and they just cannot do it, the regulation doesn't help from that point of view.
Total.
Final remark.
Dziękuję.
Thank you very much. Let us then move on to the second topic and to the second round of questions that will address an important topic, which is the European blueprint.
Tutaj kieruję się kierunku pana
And
premiera
now
z
I'm
pytaniem,
looking at you, Mr.
dlaczego ta
Deputy Prime
aktualizacja
Minister.
blueprintu jest tak
There is
ważna,
this
zwłaszcza
update, and tell us
w
why it is so
kraju.
important, especially in the current reality.
To temat niezwykle ważny.
Well, this is a
Zmieniają się
very
cały czas
important
ramy
subject.
geopolityczne.
The geopolitical
Komisji
framework
zalecenia
has been
Komisji
changing. The Commission has
dużej
its
skali,
own
wydane zostały w
large-scale
2017.
incident recommendations, and these were issued in 2017. 2017. What's happened since? The incident space has changed completely. The war in Ukraine started. There are geopolitical changes all over the world. The US and China have been taking decisions. And there is this cold, sometimes hot cyberspace war. It's going to be only getting more intense. So changes are necessary, and changes the number of levels. There is this blueprint revision that we would like to see through during our presidency. Basically should be mostly about simplifying procedures. So you need to imagine what and how you do. And it would apply to all European states. Christina, you have talked about reporting. It's about building a certain space so that everybody reports the same way. All of the EU states under the large-scale incidents do it the same way. It needs to be simplified and responsible. And all services, military or civilian, interpret it the same way. that could be a foundation for us so that we all see a given incident the same way. Imagine today in Poland, we say, how do we define this incident? Was it important, pertinent, critical, major? And there will be different levels that will take care of that. And they are very well described in our acts. They are actually also defined in our NIS. But they will be interpreted differently in the EU. So the silo mentality needs to be broken. The blueprint needs to be changed, corrected. That is going to give us an answer to the following question. There is an approaching hybrid war. That's what I see. I see it this way, I say this way, because we are very close to the front line. So the question is, what do we need to do in this context? I know that the further away you move from Ukraine, further in the south or to the west, you will see differently. But we are here in Poland. And GRU is active. We see that. And that is why we know that there is no time to waste. Europe needs to be equipped. NIS needs to be strengthened, or rather, let me rephrase that. We need to use the tools that will make it possible for us to work in Europe. It's easier to break silo mentality there, because it's harder when it was established, the silo mentality in Europe, and then it's the member states that need to deal with it somehow. Now, the blueprint revision is a source of hope. Hopefully we will come up with a simple and straightforward document that will be a source of no surprises at all. It will help us to see the reality as it is and interpret it properly. It needs to rely on existing legal foundations and to reinforce crisis management across Europe, but prevention to mitigation needs to be strengthened. Response, reconstruction after a crisis occurred, all of it needs to be covered. And we should not limit ourselves to information exchange when a crisis strikes. Information exchange today is not enough. We need to go further. All interested parties need to be able to react and respond efficiently. Also when it comes to business continuity, especially when it concerns basic services provision. This is our operational subject, and we would like you to also join in. Christiane, the role of the European Commission in this revision of Blueprint is of key importance. It is the Commission that has the initiative. It can present it as a Council recommendation. So a question to you, what is it that we can expect? How can Commission see the Blueprint revision process so that we can actually update it all till the first semester of 2025?
So it's always difficult to speak about the future when one doesn't yet have a commission in place for the next mandate. Nevertheless, we are, of course, good civil servants, so we are also preparing for the next commission, and we have certainly also taken note of the strong request coming from the member states, the latest in the Council conclusions, about updating the blueprint, because as you also rightly point out, 2017 seems like the age of innocence compared to what we're in now. It is a totally different environment we deal with now. It's also different because we've done work, we've been setting up crisis structures, we set up the networks, etc. But now we need to connect the dots, and that is what this blueprint is going to do. I like the notion also that you mentioned about breaking down the silos, because there is nothing more dangerous in cybersecurity than silos, and information not traveling, information not reaching those that needs to act on it. If you're looking, I mean, at the things we're certainly also looking at, following also the exchanges that have been with the both Hungarian and the Polish presidencies, but also in the context of the Council. I think it's also important to look at the fact that today there are no sectorial crises without a cyber element. And there's rarely, if I would say ever, a real cyber crisis, of course, without a sectorial impact. So we have on the, let's say, in the landscape, we have a lot of these different crisis tools, and the time is really come to put all of them together to make sure that we have a holistic approach. And that should, of course, also require us to look at civilian military. This is not something new that we think so. It was already, I would say, emphasized to a certain extent in the EU cyber defense policy, the importance of linking our communities for crisis management. So indeed, we're working on it now. We're already also inviting input from member states, from the networks, from also law enforcement. EC3 is important to bring in. And we're discussing with, I would say, all levels, both the technical, the operational, and the strategic, in order to starting the reflections. I would say that, of course, I cannot predict the priorities of the next Commission, but I would certainly underline that we have well noted the ambition of the Polish presidency to make this an achievement under their presidency.
Serdecznie dziękuję.
Thank you very much for highlighting that. We have very little time, so over to you, Axel. Please, briefly, show us how the private sector can be included in this cooperation under the blueprint work that needs to be done.
Yeah, well, probably not easy to give there a clear answer, but I think the recommendation for us can be use platforms like ECSO just to get the voice from the industry and use at least some recommendations we can give and provide to the European Commission, to the European Council on what we feel and see the industry needs are at the end of the day. Apart from the funding, etc., I think we need solutions, or we need a footprint that is also taking the industry demand into consideration. And I fully agree on the challenges we have, and the also environmental disasters we see. There's always digitalization involved, and we don't have clear also cyber resilient solutions for that. Maybe one blueprint or something we could show look at, which is from my point of view already harmonized or more harmonized, is the defense part, where you have that dual use things, because there you have, for example, NATO standards, NATO standard protocols, and you can interact between different countries, because otherwise NATO wouldn't work. So in those areas we'll see already collaboration where it works across different countries, because there's a need, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work. And I think we need some sort of similar or comparable approach also on the civilian side. But again, it starts, we need common and shared standards. Process has to be much faster, and we need more European alignment. I see, as a negative example, in Germany there are already 3 different approaches from 3 different federal ministries. That's not a good approach on digitalization, if every ministry stuff. And then you multiply that on the European side. I think we need a more European approach. There will be still some state-specific stuff, but I think we need a more European approach also on the public-private partnership to get at least partly away from the country-by-country approach. And I think that would be my biggest recommendation from the industry side, that you listen to the industry, but also define standard approach on digitalization, including cybersecurity aspects on the European Union, to make it short.
Miguel, briefly, tell us about the blueprint perspective, national authorities and national agencies in the context of the blueprint. What is your stance?
Yeah, very briefly. I know we are running almost out of time, but I agree that all is predictable but the future, that is true. But I think we are addressing something that we can see, let me say, we can see the world. In Chinese culture, in Asian culture, if you want to see the future, you have to be looking at your back. So I think in cybersecurity context in Europe, we have something similar, happening. Actually, the ECCC regulamen in 2018 incorporates the needs to increase the synergies between civil and military spheres, and it was 2 years before the invasion of Ukraine and the situation that we are living now in Middle East. So definitely we need to make more efforts in order to assure that we are going to do this. And the blueprint is something that can give us a new logbook for all these activities. Definitely the Poland proposal, it seems very reasonable. You propose to keep the core principle, but changing and, not changing, incorporating more clarification, more simplicity, a more easy way to address all this matter, and also increase the cooperation. But here I want to say something that I think is important. If we want to make sure that we avoid these silos that all we mentioned here, we need to make a mindset change. Because when we look at cybersecurity, there are a very important part of this view that is regarding the national security theme. So it's not easy for the defense branch of the government to understand that they got to share something that they identify as a national security matter. So we need to start to think, and we have to create the element to make sure that we start to work at the European security matter. If we keep to work in this national security and not at the European level, probably we don't make this mindset change. Regarding this blueprint, the important things for the national authorities, definitely this serious situational awareness is one of the key elements. I summarize, I don't want to go through all of them because I have some seconds. Of course, increase the cooperation and the communication is a key element that we have to make sure that it's addressed in the new blueprint. The misinformation processes are challenging us a lot regarding this matter. We have to keep in mind the whole cycle of the risk management issue. We need to look at in that way and in a common European way. I think the European Commission pushed an interesting agenda in order to facilitate this, but we need again to change the mindset of the member state in order to have the European view. And finally, we have to incorporate the market. We have to incorporate the industry to this conversation. I want to highlight this. I want to stress this point again because it's definitely very important. If they want to share the incident, they need to have confidence that the way that they are proceeding are the right way. They are not going to be having problems because they are sharing some kind of vulnerabilities. And this is also have to do a lot with the vulnerability disclosure. We have to facilitate this. We have to make sure that they are confident sharing that kind of information. They cannot be having the sense that we are waiting for them to communicate something to go behind them. So I think we also have to incorporate this.
Dziękuję, Miguel.
Miguel, thank you very much. I can see that the time is up. The discussion has been very interesting indeed. But the final word belongs to Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. Well, no summary is necessary. All we can say is, may everything that has been described here come to pass. Let's be hopeful. Let's hope that Europe takes this digital transformation very seriously. Everybody is going to play a role, but the citizens will benefit the most.
Thank you so much. Thank you.